Thank you for listening in on our podcast in the series, Intergenerational Conversations on Climate. The podcast brings together voices from high school students and senior citizens from around New Brunswick to discuss their concerns about climate change in our province. The project is the product of Voices for Sustainable Environments and Communities as part of your province's Environmental Trust Fund at work. Today we are engaged now with several conversations exploring concerns and hopes represented by senior citizens and high school students. Climate crises appear in global and national news with increasing frequency and desperation. Voices of concern can be heard every day. Voices of hope are less common. How do our friends and neighbors think about the new climate? Let's find out. Today we have Josh and Robert willing to share their thoughts. I'm Bruce Langus, and I'll be the facilitator. I'll read these questions one at a time, and I'll give each person a chance to answer them as much as they want, with as much detail as they want. And then after that first question, we will discuss our answers, either briefly or in vast and terrible detail, as you wish. And then we'll move on to the next question. We'll probably have 5 questions in the half hour. First question to Robert. How familiar are you with the changing climate?
Well, I had neighbors who were extremely concerned about climate change for many years. And climate change seemed to be affecting their way of life to a significant degree, as well as our own, in our own home. So thanks to the dedication of this couple who lived next door to us of various issues affecting climate, I became probably aware from them more as to what climate change could mean than any other source, other than what I would hear on newscasts and things of that nature. And certainly I didn't spend 2 or 3 years at university studying this matter, but I am aware that climate change is indeed something that is impacting us all.
Josh, same question. How familiar are you with our changing climate?
Well, I'd say I'm pretty familiar with it because at school it's kind of a trending topic that we like to talk about. My friends and I talk about it not often, but we do talk about it when it gets pretty bad. And you see it all over the internet, whether it's on social media, you see people talk about it, or on the news, or just in between parents and like kids, you often talk about it too. So I'd say I'm pretty familiar, but like Robert, I'm no expert, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Robert, where do you get your climate information?
From my neighbors, and they were, we were all greatly impacted upon by the floods of 2018, 2019, and as a result of that, and the fact that you folks were much more wisely instructed and interested from the perspective of delving into rationales that would affect our climate, and were constantly involved with keeping us up to date. That is how I basically became involved in my deeper knowledge or my deeper concerns about climate change.
Josh, where do you get your climate information?
A lot from school, whether it's teachers or just talking in between friends. I'd say social media a lot too. You can never be 100% sure if what you see on there is true, but there are a lot of like facts, and it really gets you like thinking about the climate when you see it on social media. and family. My grandfather is an expert, so I'd say I get a lot of it from him too. A lot of my knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And as a follow-up on that, who do you trust about climate facts? And I'm thinking, do you trust the news readers, news presenters on either radio or TV? Do you trust political figures? Do you trust business leaders?
I feel like personally, I trust people that I know, like personally more, because when it's on the news or online or whatever it is, it can be kind of enlarged to be either a bigger problem or a smaller problem. It can be like twisted so that the way that they want you to know it is known. But I feel like if it's someone you know personally, whether it's family or friends, they don't really have a reason to twist it or kind of lie to you about it, whether it's like in a larger scale or if it's just not knowing the right statistics. So I'd say personally I'd trust people that are closer to me, but also news reports I would trust too.
Robert, who do you trust to give you facts on the climate?
My neighbors. I think I trust certain news outlets. I'm a bit of a news junkie. I have particular news channels that I have more faith in than others. I won't give any examples, but I listen pretty regularly. Interestingly enough, I think we get more news from the United States than the U.S. on a host of issues, let alone climate change, than we do from our own sources inside our own country. But I listen to various reports that are made available to these people, and I feel that I have determined in my short time that this has become a really major concern, that the source of information with reference to climate change that I listen to and have faith in are accurate and are basically truthful. I can say that unequivocally, having had some experience in politics, that I don't think that one should put a whole lot of faith in what politicians have to say about what climate change is all about. And it's something that too frequently politicians, as we're seeing with the major debates that are going on in the U.S. right now with reference to gun control, put their own interests ahead of those of not only their constituents but the citizens of their country. And I think that possibly influences politicians of all stripes, both here and probably around the world, but certainly in Canada and in the U.S., as to their thoughts as to how or what we should be doing about climate change.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How do we get beyond that politicians are not truthful actors?
Well, I hearken back to the words of Winston Churchill. Democracy is just about the worst form of government that one can imagine, with the exception of all of the rest. And so it's a blemish on our democratic system, but to enjoy the freedoms and the rights that we have under a democracy, I think that we have to just be aware of what we have to put into perspective, what we have to discard. And that's something that I think is each individual's right to do.
Josh, what do you think about that? How can we make politicians more truthful and listen to what we're concerned about?
Politicians tend to kind of manipulate the truth to get votes for themselves so that they can have the control of whatever they're running for. So I feel like there's always going to be the slight manipulation of truth when it comes to politics or the government or anything like that. But I feel like just if more people become like aware of problems and kind of bring it up with the politicians, that they and like go deeper into looking for proof that the politicians are like manipulating what they want to say. If more people bring that up, I feel like they would have to be more truthful in whatever they're saying. But I don't really see that changing anytime soon.
Just as a footnote, Bruce, I'd like to add, I don't think it's fair to, and it was not my intention, to put all politicians into that same classification. There are some who, in recent history, in this country, who have not only laid their own careers on the line for making tough decisions, but the lives of all of those who were adherents of theirs and were part and parcel of the process, being members of Parliament or associated with members of Parliament who did pay a price, but that was because of principle. And so I think it's important that we understand that there can be, and there are certainly, principled politicians of all stripes. I don't categorize just one party over the other. So I wouldn't want to have it thought that my opinion was that all politicians are greedy to the extent that they will not do the right thing at the end of the day. But unfortunately, there are quite a few who will and do.
Good point. Robert, do you share your feelings, not just about climate change, but other issues? Do you share your feelings with your MLA and your MP?
Rarely. No, not frequently. Again, I had a particular issue just not 2 weeks ago, that 3 weeks ago perhaps, that I felt I would like to discuss with a certain local politician. I contacted them, made them aware of the issue that I was speaking of, and unfortunately, to this day, I've not heard a single word back. So, no, I don't bother too much with that any longer.
Josh, have you, either through a high school class or just on your own initiative, have you ever sent a letter or email to either your MLA or your MP about climate?
Not a letter or anything like that, but I believe it was in 9th grade. Our whole school went on a protest down to City Hall, and we went down there and we had signs, and we stayed out there for an hour or two, and we just kind of protested that, the environment was kind of crumbling and stuff. A letter to like someone higher above, I'd say, no. I feel like that wouldn't really do anything if it's just one letter from one student, but maybe if like the whole school or like everyone that had a problem with it sent a letter, then something might get done. But I feel like protesting and being there in person with a bunch of other people is more effective than sending letters.
Robert, somebody who's been in that chair of a standing politician, what influenced you during that time? Letters from high school students, or?
I think, well, I don't want to get into the subject of what makes a good politician and what doesn't make a good politician, but politicians, at least at the federal level, and I guess probably at the provincial level as well, because I experienced both, have a choice to make. They can delve themselves entirely into the process of legislative matters and dealing with various bills and perhaps being creative about producing them. In other words, they become Ottawa people, or they become Fredericton people, whichever, in this province. And or you can become a constituency person and deal with constituency issues that are brought to your attention. My preference during those years was to be a constituency person, which is why I have a difficult time accepting the fact that in just the most recent example, 3 weeks has passed that I have not had a response from a certain MP. You've got they have choices, and they can make a difference, but their choices that they make can definitely affect issues that are of major concern, and certainly climate change has got to be on the desk of every elected official that represents any sort of a constituency, whether wherever it be in the free world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sticking on the subject of politics, I guess this is the most basic form of politics. Josh, how would you feel about Canada giving the vote to 16-year-olds?
I don't know. It's a hard question. There's a lot of 16-year-olds that I feel would get kind of tunnel visioned, I guess, in a way, about how they would only think of the climate change. If they were wanting to vote for the climate, they would kind of get tunnel visioned into only wanting that, and they wouldn't think about the voting like about the society or economically, or just like in a bigger, larger picture. I feel like a lot of teens kind of get in their own world about what they want. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of teens would, like having the vote to 16-year-olds would kind of allow us to see in a bigger picture what the society wants, because teens are the future, and that is like a fact. So having them be able to cast their vote on what they want for the world would also be a good thing. So it's a hard question, but I would say, yeah, I'd say 16-year-olds should have the vote.
Robert, what do you think?
Well, Bruce, I know that you would find it hard to believe, but I was 16 at one time. And I can well recall I had a lot of friends that were 16 as well, a group of reasonable 16-year-olds, I should think. I'd be scared to death if they had the vote, quite frankly. Why not give it to 14-year-olds or 12-year-olds? So I think their maturity and life's experiences play a factor. By the time you're 18, you're out of, for the most part, out of high school, and you've gained supposedly some maturity. You've been exposed to some of life's experiences with reference to perhaps high Y clubs and Boy Scouts or Girl Guides or whatever it may have been, all of which are character builders. And I think that it's important that people who have the vote, which millions on this planet do not have, is a very valuable thing, and one that should be cherished by every citizen of a free democracy. And I feel that you should have what is normally thought as enough of life's experiences to use that power of the ballot in a very sensible and responsible manner. And I feel that probably 16-year-olds, again, I repeat, having been there, perhaps don't hold all of the capacity to be able to make decisions that would be in the best interest of the country or perhaps the world.
Josh, how do you feel about that? Is a 18-year-old more mature than a 16-year-old?
Well, bottom line, it's only really 2 years difference. Robert said that he was 16 at one point, and that's, obviously, but there's 16-year-olds when you were 16 might have been more kind of less caring about the world or such, but I feel like now, like in my school and like the way that my friends are, we're personally a lot more, I don't want to say mature, but I would say mature for our age. We're really engaged at school in the environment and like the economic and just the way that our society kind of works. We're really involved in that. So I feel like 2 years, not a lot can change, but that's just, I don't know. I'd say giving the vote to 16-year-olds would still be a good idea, just because it's 2 years difference. We've still had a lot of experience, and we're getting close to graduating high school, so I'd say that it'd be a good idea.
As a dinosaur who I don't remember being 16, I guess I must have.
You were.
At some point, I remember a lot of volcanoes going off then, and there were strange dinosaurs flying around. But I'm not sure, and certainly a lot of my friends who were that age weren't very mature. And yet, I look around now, and I see a lot of 60 and 70-year-old people who aren't very mature either.
Oh, boy, you bet that.
So, not sure what the answer to that is. One last question for each of you. Robert, is the climate crisis the threat we should be most concerned about now?
No, I couldn't say, Bruce, with all sincerity that climate change should be the only threat that we, as a part of the global community, should be concerned about. We certainly, it is up there. The nuclear proliferation is a very, very immediate thing that has been brought to our attention just in recent months as being a potential global threat. There are so many issues that we have got to be concerned about, including our capability of being able to maintain ourselves and maintain our families, the economy. So although I certainly feel that climate change is as important as any of the others, I do feel that there's a basket out there of matters and issues that we have got to, as a world community and a global community, we have got to pay attention to and be aware of and be wary of.
Josh, is climate change the threat we should be most concerned about today?
That's a hard question because it's definitely very important, but there's a lot of problems in the world right now that are hard to control all at once. So obviously climate change is very important because we're getting to the point of no return in the next decade or so. If we don't really kind of step up our game, it's just going to be a down spiral to nonstop rising temperatures and sea levels and just the climate kind of deteriorating. So getting in the right track to fix that is very important, but there's also many other, like whether it's not global or just other global problems that are also very important. But I would say climate change is probably one of, if not the most important one, yeah.
Very good, very good. We'll wrap it up there. Let me thank our participants, Robert and Josh. And I also want to thank Cameron Davidson and April Oak for recording and managing the session and producing today's podcast. Thank you all for your wisdom.